The BS Report is a free-flowing conversation that occasionally touches on mature subjects.
First of all,
this is the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
It might be cool, I don't know. And if it's not, I don't care.
The BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Bill Simmons works for ESPN. He's also named the sports guy, and he writes a comical sports column. He must be a popular dude.
The BS Report.
It's got a real dirty sound, like a rusty steak knife cutting through a well-aged steak.
Now.
Here's Bill Simmons.
Welcome to the BS Report on the Subway Fresh Take Hotline right now from TNT, Marv Albert's partner on the NBA games, as well as from MikeFratello.com and a few NBA teams that you remember that he coached, and now he's here. Mike Fratello, what's happening?
Bill, how are you today?
Tell me how you're feeling 2 days after, I would say that's one of the most memorable finals of my lifetime. What was your initial take on it?
When have we had a finals that have had more minutes where the game was as close as those games were, 1 through 6? It was, an incredible run within the games by both teams. This team goes on an 8-2 run, timeout. This team comes back out, 6-zip. And it went back and forth like that. I thought you saw a little bit of everything in that series. You saw not only some great plays, you saw some disappointing plays, you saw some terrific coaching moves as the chess match developed going throughout, changing starting lineups as the series went along. All those little things that take place that sometimes you don't see them happen in a series, or you don't take notice of them happening. But you had guys step up at the defensive end of the floor. We tend to associate scoring stats that way, but other guys who dug in defensively and got big stops when they had to, or forced players into having poor performances. So it was just a terrific series.
Did you feel like it was an upset, or should Dallas have won that series?
You look at it at first, and because so many people felt Miami playing as well as they did, coming out of the Chicago series the way they did, was going to wind up winning the series. But I guess in fairness, you have to say 8 games against each other during this past season, and Dallas won 6 of the 8. Well, that, I think, proves that you're a better team.
Right.
And this is one of those times where the word team, really comes into effect, because it was just not the accumulation of all-star players, outstanding players, because both teams had that. Miami obviously having more recognition for their big three than the Dallas players now, since Jason Kidd has moved along in years, and Terry has moved along in years. Nowitzki seems like he's going to play forever. But Dallas really put it together the way a team is meant to be put together. Whoever, Donnie Nelson Jr., along with Cuban and the head coach Carlisle, when they sat down and added pieces and tried to have depth on the team, and when you look at payroll in the NBA, Bill, only I think the Lakers have a higher payroll than the Mavericks did. Mavericks are right up around $91 million in salary, so it shows the commitment that Cuban had to this organization and to the city, where they wanted to make sure they had enough depth. And we saw both coaches from both teams use that depth at different times during the series. A guy like Stojakovic, who helps him, in rounds 1 and 2, doesn't get in. You don't see him anymore. A guy like James, Jones for Miami, who helps him early in the playoffs, doesn't wind up playing as they shorten the roster, make different rotations in. Juwan Howard suddenly appears in the last couple of games for Miami. Ilgauskas doesn't get a uniform on. All of that is the manipulating of depth on the roster. And, Dallas certainly was provided enough talent and that meshed together and gave him what Rick Carlisle needed. You need shooting, you got it. You need rebounding, defense, you got it. Guys coming off with some toughness, all of that played into effect.
You're a coach junkie. You come from the old school when coaches coached, when they mattered. And I just feel like coming out of this playoffs, Carlisle has to be the best coach in the league, right? Who's better than him right now?
Years ago, Hall of Fame coach Chuck Daly had said that Rick Carlisle has one of the brightest minds he's been around. And he said way back then that this guy will be a terrific coach in the NBA for a number of years. And, I can remember sitting in one of the NBA Coaches Association meetings, and they were about to vote for a new president. And I remember saying to the group, I had been the former president way back many years back, and I just mentioned to the group, I said, when you're thinking about who you're going to elect, because Lenny Wilkins had done it for a number of years, and I said, just try and pick a guy that you think is going to be around for a while. You know, with the way coaches are being fired and replaced, don't pick a guy that's going to be gone in a year and a half if you want some stability within the Coaches Association. And the guy they voted in was Rick Carlisle, and it wound up being a good choice. So, you know, he did it in Detroit. Okay, wound up, you know, 50-plus wins a couple of years in a row, Eastern Conference Finals. He comes back now in Dallas, and the faith that obviously Cuban had in him to replace Avery Johnson, who did a terrific job. And it was nice to see some of the Dallas players pay tribute to Avery, putting the beginning of the defensive philosophy in, and Rick, you know, carrying it on from there. And, you know, Rick just did an outstanding job. Not to say that Eric Spoelstra, under the pressure that he had on him this season, also didn't do a good job to get that team to the finals.
And Carlisle also, I thought, did a good job in Indiana, and you could argue that if the Artest melee didn't happen, Indiana might win the 2005 title. This just seems like a guy that has been good wherever he went. It was hard for me to believe that he was unemployed for, I think, 2 years. Doesn't make a lot of sense. The thing that impressed me the most, though, I love how he uses timeouts, and I think that is like almost the most underrated skill for a coach, is the way he controls the tempo of the game. And every time it felt like Miami was coming on, boom, he was on the court with a timeout. Did you notice that, or am I just reading too much into that?
No, it's a good observation, and you know the key is to be able to use the timeouts at the right moment, yet still make sure you have enough at the end of the game when you need them to make the strategic play or call that you need to either tie a game or win a game or get the ball in the right person's hands at the end. And you know they don't, meaning coaches, when I say they don't allow too many long runs to take place unless they gamble. Once in a while they gamble and hope that the next dead ball will force the TV timeout rather than use up one of theirs. But they don't allow too many long runs. Most of the time you get a 6-zip or 8-2 run, they're calling a timeout right away to slow the game down and try and get the thing back under control again if they feel it's getting away from them. So, yeah, your observation was very good about him taking strategic timeouts and the momentum shifts taking place because of the timeouts.
And it seems like, one of the things that I think's changed from when you were coming up in the 80s to now is that it's all about the small picture stuff and the minutia and what's happening from play to play. And sometimes I wonder if the coaches, they don't see the big picture sometimes. And for me, the two big things, the big picture things, was one, how he used the timeouts and how he just wouldn't let Miami get on the roll. And the other thing was just being smart enough to realize halfway through the series, we need more offense in the first and third quarters. I got to put Barea and I got to take Stevenson out. Coaches in general are a little bit afraid to shake it up, especially, as you get deeper and deeper in the playoffs. Do you feel like things will change now that Carlisle took some big gambles and they paid off?
Well, not only Rick. I mean, that was it took a courage, let's say, to use that word, courage to do what he did in putting Barea into the starting lineup. But then, on the other hand, you saw Spoelstra come back and take Bibby out of the starting lineup and put Chalmers in, who really gave him a terrific playoff series down the stretch.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get into that mold of when you get to the playoffs, you're supposed to shorten the rotation. You don't want to disrupt. People worry about, well, you're going to take the guy's head out of the game if you don't start him and ask him to come off the bench.
Right.
I think that develops during the course of the entire season. You sit with your team. You have to trust in each other. You have to believe in each other. When a player tells you something, the coach has to believe he's being honest. When the coach tells the team something, the team has to believe he's being honest. And then if you have that understanding from the beginning, the coach calls you in and says, listen, I think the best thing for our team is if I bring you in off the bench for these reasons, and I'm going to put this guy in the starting lineup for these reasons. And if the player is truly about team, not just about himself, he understands. He trusts, he buys in, and you move forward. Stevenson comes out in Game 6. He's on fire from behind the three-point line. Barea gave him the offense that they needed. Chalmers, going into the starting lineup, had a couple of big early steals, if you remember. He had huge three-pointers during the 6-game series against Dallas. So nice moves by the coaches where they had the guts, the courage to do these types of things where other guys may have shied away from it.
Is there anything Miami didn't do in this finals that you feel like they should have done?
One thing I think Miami fans never got to see was the real Mike Miller. And it was a very important signing for their team. He took less money that he could have gotten in other places, just like Udonis Haslem did. They were fortunate to get Haslem back because Spoelstra has great confidence and trust in Haslem. But they never saw Mike Miller really do what Mike Miller is capable of doing. So, we could probably pick out a guy or two on Dallas's roster that, maybe didn't get as much playing time or do what he was able to do during the regular season. But sometimes that's just the way it is. Miller, I don't think, was ever healthy. That was one more thing that they needed. And the other big thing that Miami did not do against Dallas that they really hurt Chicago with was getting to the free throw line.
Yeah.
If you remember in the Chicago series, it seemed anytime LeBron snapped his head back or Wade snapped his head back, a whistle blew, and they went to the foul line. They didn't get those same calls in the finals. Whether officials wound up reviewing, whether the league office wound up reviewing the previous series, whether coaches sent tapes in and said, look, watch this isn't really a foul. I don't know that, but I'm just noticing that they didn't get to the line nearly as much on the small, as coaches would say, tic-tac calls during the Chicago series that they did in the finals. So that was one of the things where they lost points, couldn't pick up points, extra points against the Dallas defense.
And it also seemed like Dallas did a nice job of just having congestion in front of the basket and making these guys shoot jumpers, and they were making those jumpers in round 2 and 3, and they stopped going in the finals. I'm looking at this zone defense that they threw out a few times to a lot of success. And why doesn't every team have a zone defense? Why isn't this something that is a real weapon for the contenders? Why is Dallas the only one that really had it?
Most coaches are afraid to stay with the zone too long, and it seems that, Bill, when coaches go to a zone during the course of the game, and I can't tell you how many times this happens, they'll be in a timeout, one of the assistants will say, why don't we come out and play zone after the timeout, give them a different look. The coach goes, okay, we'll try it. They go out, first time down, the opponent shoots a three, makes it, the coach looks at the assistant and said, nice suggestion. They go back to their man-to-man defense.
Right.
You're reluctant for a couple reasons. One, there's a belief that you're not going to win a championship playing too much zone. The second is many people don't practice it enough. They actually don't play a lot of zone in their practices. Yeah, they do it a little bit so they can work against zones in case other teams use it, and you have your zone offense ready if you have a special attack. But the general consensus is you've got to be a good, solid man-to-man team to win a championship. And what Rick was willing to do was throw that little something special in there, live with it. If Miami made one shot or two shots against it, he didn't back away from it, shy away from it. They played the odds. They gambled that. Miami is not a great perimeter shooting team overall. We'll live with Wade and LeBron taking perimeter shots. Mike Miller, if he's making them, he's a problem because when he makes them in bunches. But Mike wasn't the same Mike Miller that he had been in previous years because of the surgery on the one thumb, the problem on the other thumb. He was an injured, banged-up Mike Miller. So they gambled with that. They stayed with it, and it did pay big dividends. The few times, the minutes that they bought with that, they were able to keep their smaller guys, Barea, etc., Terry, on the outside, the perimeter, clog up the front of the rim with their bigger guys. And I thought one of the telling things was Jason Kidd mentioning after the sixth game, we made a commitment before the series started that we were not going to give up layups and dunks and highlight film baskets to Miami. We were going to take hard fouls, not flagrant fouls, but hard fouls to make them go to the free throw line and make their foul shots against us. And what better example than the last game, Miami missing all those free throws. But the difference was, I'm sure Dallas talked about this under Avery Johnson. I'm sure they talked about it in the past under Rick Carlisle. This team did it and stuck with it all the way through. It wasn't like 20 minutes of hard fouls, no layups, and then you let him go to the basket and don't touch him. This was game after game after game, sticking with the game plan, sticking with the philosophy, and it eventually paid off when they missed all of those free throws in game number 6.
And as a Celtic fan, that was my biggest disappointment of round 2. Is that?
No, I didn't know you were a Celtic fan. You like Boston, huh?
Well,
hey Bill. By the way, you didn't take a shot at my hair in the book, did you?
Of course I did. The perm, I did. Absolutely.
You took a little shot. I thought I was concerned about that. Yeah.
I was also there the game when the guy threw the drink on you and you almost got into an Artest melee of your own.
Do you remember that? And I got carried out by the security guards. Yeah,
you were coming off. We had this guy who, my dad and I used to call him Big Bird. He was this guy who had this mustache and this big curly hair. He always had a drink, and he was always yelling at the refs and the coaches. And I don't know what he said to you, but all of a sudden you guys were like ready to throw down. What was that?
What happened was, do you remember the old timer that Boston used to sit in the chair?
Yep.
Right by off to the side of the court. I mean, he sat in his own chair right there, like on the side of the court.
Yeah.
And I had walked down towards half court to call the last play of the quarter. And all of a sudden I hear all this stuff coming out of his mouth, and I'm looking, I turn to him, I go, hey, you got nothing to say to me. Well, when I said that to the older gentleman, here comes that guy out of the stands.
Yeah.
And when I saw him coming with the big beard, I figured, let me get him first before he gets me. So that's when we tried to attack rather than be the receiver of that one. And next thing I know, I'm being carried out of the building by the security guards. And Ron Rothstein, my assistant, had to come out in the hallway and tell the security guys, this guy's the coach of the team.
Right.
They were escorting me out of the building, so I couldn't coach the last quarter.
That's great. That's the kind of stuff that happened in the old Boston Garden. I was also there for Game 5 and Game 7 in 1988, which Game 5 probably the greatest win in the history of the Hawks franchise, because you go up 3-2 against the Bird McHale Parrish Celtics, and Bird still had his fastball at that point. And now you're going back to Atlanta for Game 6. It's a Friday night. Crowd is insane. And the final play ended up being Cliff Livingston. What happened on the final play?
Yeah, good call on that one. Game 5 was just a huge win. It gave us 3 straight after being down 0-2 in the series, and it's a great example of a young team and the city. The city was so great. The fans were so great in Atlanta. They were so excited. But we got too excited. We got too emotional. We came into game number 6 in our building with a chance to close it out. And what happened was all the small things that we had corrected in games 3, 4, and 5, it started with the opening tip. One of our points was we've got to get the Celtics off the three-point line. And on the opening tip of game 6, they tipped it to Ainge. He took 2 dribbles to the three-point line, shot it, and it went in. And I looked at it and went, oh, man, I hope that's not a bad omen. And then they jumped us early, but with the crowd and with our full court pressing against them, we worked our way back into the game. We catch them. We go up by 5, I think it was at the time, and Dennis Johnson was exhausted. He was trying to get the ball up over the half-court line. He just about jumps over the half-court line on the 10 count, jumps over, picks up his dribble, and now he's standing there. He's like one step over the half-court line. We're denying everybody else the next pass. He can't pass the ball to anybody, and he looks up at the shot clock and realizes there's only 4 seconds left. He dribbles the ball right to the basket, shoots a layup, floating layup, gets fouled by Tree Rollins. It goes in. None of the referees saw that he had picked up his dribble, held the ball for like 10 seconds, and then dribbled again to the basket.
I don't remember that.
And to me, it was like one of the most amazing misses because it changed everything. It would have been our ball, side out, 5-point lead. The crowd was going nuts. Instead, they get a 3-point play, cut it to 2. Rollins goes out of the game with his second foul, and it kind of changed the momentum. We got down to the last play of the game. They came out of the timeout, and they put Dennis Johnson on Dominique, who, obviously we're trying to get the ball to Neek. And we ran the play, and the first option was to get it into Neek's hands, and Dennis Johnson did a good job of denying. We had no timeouts left. He denied Neek the ball. When he denied Neek, we had to look to the second or third option. Cliff Livingston flashes back to the ball and catches it. We couldn't take a timeout. We had none left. So I think Doc Rivers was taking it out. We make the pass to Livingston. He turns, and he's got to make something happen. There's only like 3 seconds left on the clock.
Right.
He puts it on the floor, and he tries to shoot a floating hook shot over the top of Bird, Parrish, and McHale.
Yeah.
And it didn't quite wind up the way Magic's did when he shot the hook shot.
And then Game 7 was, I think, one of the 3 best basketball games I've ever been to. And, I wanted to ask you about Dominique, because I think LeBron, he's not, he's only been in the league 7 years, I think. So it's not like it's at this point yet, but he hasn't won the title. Dominique has never made the finals, and this was the closest he was going to probably get that year. He played out of his mind offensively. It was one of the best offensive performances I've ever seen in person. Defensively, not as good. But him and Doc Rivers were just fantastic, and it just wasn't quite enough, and Dominique never got there again. Do you think it's fair that we judge these guys by how their teams did, basically? Like, if you win the finals, you're at a different level than you were if you didn't win the finals. Do you think that's fair?
I don't know if it's fair or not, because we've had some great players, as you know, like the Malones and Stocktons and Barkleys and on, guys who, got there and never won it. But that is the way you're judged by your peers, and it's the way you're judged by so many of the media people, that you have to be a champion, you have to have a ring to be able to be put at that top upper echelon, because then they can say not only was he a great player, but he was a winner. He was a champion as well. So there is a special line there that separates him. That doesn't make a player a lesser player. Can he be a great player and not have won a championship? The answer is yes. But as far as when you want to be in that select circle, you've got to be able to have the bragging rights of saying, we were the best team in the world for this season. I was part of that team. And that, just adds to your legacy as you move forward. I mean, we have Hall of Famers. Obviously, Barkley won, Dominique has won, Malone, Stockton, that didn't win championships. But in their mind, if you asked them, was there something you were denied or you missed in your career in the NBA, I'd probably say, if they were all honest, they would say, yeah, that I don't have a ring, a championship ring.
And in Dominique's case, part of the reason he never got there was he was flawed to some degree. He was a fantastic offensive player. He was not a good defensive player. And he was also a guy that I think Doc Rivers once famously said was a guy that you could ask him at any point of the game how many points he had, and Dominique would know. Is that the type of player that you can win a title with as your best guy?
I think he can. I think the talent of a Dominique, if he has other players around him, that team that year that lost to Boston in the 7th game, Doc was having a terrific game. The only problem that Doc had, he got in some early foul trouble. We couldn't keep him on the floor as many minutes as I would have liked to in that game because of the foul problems. And remember, when we would substitute for Doc, it was basically Spud coming in, who was terrific and had a great year and great series. But we're giving up some size there, okay? Dennis, if you went down in the hole with Dennis, we had to make some adjustments, obviously, if Spud was guarding him. So that was one thing. Randy Whitman, people forget, I think Randy had like 28 in that game, number 7.
Yeah.
But Randy was a different kind of player. Terrific open shooter, smart, heady guy, but not an off-the-dribble guy. So he couldn't break you down very much from the two-guard position. Tree Rollins was a center that could block shots, set screens, grab rebounds, but you couldn't throw the ball in the hole and expect him to get you 18 points a night. That's just not what Tree was. Now, if you change some of those pieces around and you've got Dominique there as the anchor to them, I certainly think they can win a championship because Meek was one of those players that big games, big moments, he liked, taking his game to a different level. He rose up to that challenge at those moments. And, you can point out shortcomings on a lot of guys. People said, Dominique didn't play defense. Look, he worked at doing what we asked him to do. Was he the defensive stopper of the year? No, he was not. But we could cover for him with guys like Willis and Tree Rollins behind him, with Doc, with the other guys doing the job that they had to do in our team defense, and we could get by. I probably, looking back, kicked myself in the butt for not going after Bird down the stretch and getting the ball out of his hands. I didn't want to give up threes. I was concerned about that. I banked on the fact that, we just need to get 1 or 2 stops here on Bird. Yeah. But we didn't. The greatness of Bird showed up. He made the big baskets, none bigger. First that drive across the lane where he shoots it with the other hand and it goes in. Then he makes the three-pointer in front of our bench. And
right.
Looking back, I probably should have gone after him with the next guy, come a little bit hard on him, made him give the ball up, and make somebody else have to make big shots at the big moment. And that's one of the things I kicked myself in the rear end for not doing during that game.
And you also had an unbelievable crowd in that game, and I just don't think I don't know if you're going to get an NBA crowd like that in 2011 other than maybe the Knicks. It's just the buildings are different. They're a little more sterile. You have more suits and people who don't really totally care what's happening sitting in the good seats. But, you think back to those Hawks teams. They gave the Celtics, for whatever reason, the Hawks and the Blazers were the two teams that just used to really give the Celtics everything they could handle in the mid-'80s, mainly because they had so many good athletes. Even in '86, and I thought the '86 Celtics team was the best team ever, they used to have wars with the Hawks that year until finally Game 5 of the playoffs, the Celtics flipped it around. But do you kind of feel like that team was just in the wrong era? Like maybe 7 years later it would have been different for that team?
Hasn't that happened to a number of teams?
Yeah, I guess.
Over the years, there have been a number of really good teams with terrific players and excellent coaches that they just happened to meet up with that group, and probably most of them fell to either the Lakers, the Celtics,
or the Pistons.
The Sixers for a certain stretch, and then the Pistons. Chicago had to eventually learn how to get past Detroit before they could win it.
Right.
And if you wound up meeting up with the first round opponent, that I'll give you another example where it happened. It happened when I went down to Memphis to take over that team. Our first year that I took over, we wound up meeting Phoenix, and that was Phoenix with Quentin Richardson, with Joe Johnson, with a younger Steve Nash.
Yeah.
I mean, they were really good, that Phoenix team, and we wound up meeting them in the first round. I thought we played well, and we played hard, and we played even with them for a lot of the minutes, but Phoenix went deep that year into the playoffs. Then the next year, we come back and we lose 4 straight to Dallas. One, Nowitzki makes a 3 on a loose ball at the buzzer. We're winning by 3. The loose ball bounces back out to him at the top of the three-point line. He catches, he shoots, ties the game. We go to overtime and lose that one. That's the year Dallas went on to the finals and lost to Miami. You meet the raw. We couldn't get a win at that time in Memphis. Memphis was trying to get their first playoff win. Forget about winning a series. And you wind up, meeting teams that are good, are deep, and are playing good basketball, and you just can't match up with them at that particular time.
What was your reaction when Memphis did the dollar for 4 quarters trade for Pau Gasol to the Lakers? Because you had coached him, you knew how good he was. Were you like, oh my God, this is over, or were you like, well, maybe he ran his course there? What were you thinking?
Bill, I'm having a little bit of a difficult time hearing you right now.
Oh, Joe, can you hear me now?
It's a little bit better. Could be this phone at this end. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'll turn Bill up a little bit, but if on your end there's a way to turn the volume up there.
Yeah, I'm trying. I think I got it all the way up here.
Okay, I'll put Bill up a little bit as well.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I'll ask again. What was your reaction when the Lakers traded for Pau Gasol? Because you had coached this guy, and you knew how good he was. Did you just feel like that was a hijacking, or did you feel it was the right time for him to leave Memphis?
I wish I knew what had been talked about behind closed doors, but I remember that I had been fired in Memphis at the time, and for some reason after that year before, where we had a terrific run, they wound up winning 49 games. We had signed Damon Stoudemire to a 4-year contract as a free agent. I thought we really were going to make some noise, and Damon blows his knee out X number of games into the season, and the saving grace was we were able to pick up Chucky Atkins, who Washington let go. Chucky Atkins came in, took over Damon's spot, and that team went on with Eddie Jones and Shane Battier, Miller, Gasol, Lorenzen Wright. And they won 49 games that season, and I thought they really had some terrific young pieces looking down the road. Mike Miller was young, and Shane was young, and Gasol was young, and I think we had Warwick at that time, who we had just drafted the year before. So we had some nice young pieces to add to. And then that summer, over the summer, something took place where there was a change in the direction that they wanted to go. I don't know what that was, what the thinking was, but we traded Battier away. We got the draft rights to eventually they used the pick for Rudy Gay.
Right.
We come back in and we took Gay. We had Kyle Lowry out of Villanova. Those two guys as rookies. We gave away a couple of the other veteran guys. We didn't bring back Lorenzen Wright, who was a free agent. And, obviously the crowning moment for destruction was about 3:30 in the morning during the summer. I'm watching the World Championships, and Gasol breaks his foot playing for Spain. And there I'm sitting saying, uh-oh, that's a problem. Coming back into the season, no Gasol for who knows how long, 3 months, 4 months. So we changed the roster. We went completely young. Gasol breaks his foot. We get off to a terrible start. I get fired, but then after that, down the road, I get a call from Mr. Heisley, the owner of Memphis, and I remember him saying to me, what do you think about trading Gasol? And I remember saying to him, Mr. Heisley, you made an unbelievable commitment to this young man. You paid him max. You gave him the years that he wanted. And he said, yeah, but Powell has come in and mentioned he wants to play somewhere where he has a chance to win a championship. And my feeling was, why isn't he helping Memphis win the championship?
Right. I had the same feeling.
Stay in Memphis. You've done what you could do for this guy monetarily. Now you just got to add the pieces around. But maybe at that point, Powell saw that, wait a minute, they've gotten rid of, Shane is gone, Lorenzen Wright is gone.
Yeah.
How long is it going to take for this team to add enough pieces back again? I'm not trying to speak for Powell, but I'm just trying to think of what may have been going through his mind. And he may have felt like, I want to go somewhere where I have a chance, to do better more quickly. So the trade happens with the Lakers. And, for the Lakers, it meant championships right away. You're getting a guy, perhaps the most skilled big man in basketball right now. You talk about being able to handle the ball, pass the ball, score the basketball, rebound the basketball. He's intelligent. And all of a sudden, they go and win back-to-back championships when you add Powell to Kobe and the rest of the mix. So it was a bonanza for them. And eventually, I'm sure Memphis would say, it didn't turn out that bad for us. We got his younger brother who's turned into a very solid center. And we've been able to add the pieces around. And here they are with a very, very good season this year.
It was the worst trade of the decade, and then Marc Gasol shed 30 pounds and turned out to be good. And then all of a sudden it wasn't the worst trade of the decade. I think he's a really good center, especially because the center position is just kind of dying, There's maybe 5 people like him in the entire league now. You must have been happy, even though they fired you eventually, but you must have been happy to see Memphis go into the second round and get those full house crowds, beat San Antonio. Like, that was the first really good thing that's ever happened to that team.
Yeah, it's a great city for basketball. If you've never been down to Memphis, they love basketball. It starts with University of Memphis, where they have given great support for so many years to their basketball program, where they sell out all of their collegiate basketball games. And then when the franchise came to the city, if there's one concern, you wonder, can the people there, because of the economy and what's going on, can they really afford to buy the tickets night in and night out to support the NBA team? But you hope they would be able to. They've made adjustments in the pricing of tickets there to try and make it more feasible. But you give that team a winner in basketball, they'll be there. It's great. They loved it. I'm really happy for Michael Heisley because he's a guy who's made a commitment. He's a tough-minded businessman who, when he sets his sights on something, he wants to get it done. He wants to accomplish it. And, people have said for the last couple of years, Heisley will sell the team and get out of there. All he cares about is making some money on the sale. That's not true. That's not true about Michael Heisley. He's a very generous man. He's a giving man. He cares about the community. He's a little bit like Mark Cuban. Okay. He'll put the money into it if he sees that it makes sense and he has a chance to win because he likes to win. He's a very competitive guy.
So you think that that's a team that stays? Because sometimes they get thrown into the grouping of teams that might move, might get contracted. Like, I feel like that team is now secure after what happened in the playoffs.
Well, geographically, should they be in the East or should they be in the West? If you look at where they're situated, just take the map out of the United States and look and put your finger on Memphis. You wait a minute, maybe this team should be over in the other conference, and let's take somebody else and shift them over. They have a tough time with time zones because Memphis, being an hour behind the East, when they wind up going and playing all these Western Conference teams, they're giving up 2 hours when they start heading out west with a lot of those teams. And then you travel back and on back-to-back games and 3 games in 4 nights, 4 and 5 nights. Their players make many more adjustments time-wise than many of the other teams are asked to do. So if you had to do it over again, it's not that easy to reshape a 30-team league the way the NBA is right now. Maybe you'd like to see Memphis in a different area if they're going to be in the Western Conference team, or start to switch some other teams around and take a look at it.
The NBA's had map problems for a long time. I detailed some of them in my book. It's been an ongoing problem for the league. I got to ask you about LeBron.
What would you like to know about Mr. James?
What do you think happened? Everybody has a theory. What's your theory?
Well, I'm listening to comments from people outside the area, and there are the pro-LeBron and there are the anti-LeBron statements that you're hearing people make. And people who are pro-LeBron are feeling that a lot of this criticism is unjust, that people have gone too far in criticizing him. And the only thing that I would say to those people, if you don't live in Cleveland, in the Cleveland area, then you don't know what went on here for the 7 years that he was here.
Yep.
For the 7 years that he brought great basketball moments, helped bring the team to the NBA Finals, sell out the arena night after night, and he was their homegrown child who had turned into this young man that was a MVP basketball player in the NBA. And I think the people here envisioned him being here for his entire career, that he would never go anywhere. And some of the decisions and how he handled certain things along the way were not good. Wherever they came from, if they were all his own, then he has to live with those decisions. If it was listening to other people that were making suggestions or the advice of a group of people that were recommending things, they gave him bad advice in certain situations. And what it did is, in a blue-collar community like Cleveland, who is undergoing a 3 or 4 year corruption investigation to all the top politicians in downtown Cleveland, whose school systems, they've cut budgets back, they're cutting money from athletic teams, for high school players. They've big major companies have moved out of the city. All of this going on, this was like the one bright light, shining light that they would all identify with. It was a downtown party whenever Cleveland was playing at home. If they couldn't afford a ticket or couldn't get a ticket because it was sold out, they would flood the places downtown and would be showing the games on TV. It was great income for the people in the downtown community. Well, suddenly, this player disappears. Now, did he have a right to leave? Yeah, he did, of course. That's what free agency is all about. At some point, if a player's contract runs out and he wants to move on, he's able to do it. How he did it could have been handled differently. And it got worse after the fact, or after they showed the TV show, the decision. It got worse with some of the statements that came out after it, disassociating yourself from Cleveland. I'm from Akron. I'm not from Cleveland. All of that was unnecessary. It was not good for the people here to hear about. Show a little bit of compassion. The owner had done everything he could possibly do, from building a $38 million practice facility away from the arena, separate location with all the needs, happened to be a little bit closer to where LeBron was living, the practice facility, than having to drive downtown every day, going out and bringing in probably 6 to 8 or 9 new players that they wanted to add to the team, and financially costing him a lot of money. All of that to try and build a championship team around LeBron. It didn't happen, but LeBron certainly had the right to leave, but how he did it, if he had it to do over again, I wish he would have rethought the thing and done it a little bit differently. You could have left as one of their sons moving on that was very appreciative of their support, very appreciative of the ownership, and you leave it with, look, this is something that I feel I have to do at this time. I want to go out there and try and get this done, this championship, even though it's not in Cleveland. I love you. I love everything that happened here in 7 years. And that's it. You let it go. But it didn't happen that way, and that's what's caused the reaction around the country. And all of a sudden it became, it's like USA minus Miami versus the Heat. And whether you think it's fair or not, that's what it came down to being in the end.
And how much, everything you just described, you did a really good job, by the way. Everything you just described, do you think that fundamentally changed him as a player? Because, when you look at what he did in the finals, he was getting the line 3 times a game and just didn't look like LeBron. And, maybe it was the scrutiny, maybe it was the pressure, maybe it was the fact that Dwayne Wade, he had some sort of felt like this was Dwayne's team and he didn't know how to fit in. Like, what do you think all the factors were? What was the biggest?
Bill, how many pages were in your book?
700.
700, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you imagine if you wrote a book, if you were allowed inside the Heat locker room for the entire season, how big that book would be with what you would have come out of that locker room with? And
so you think...
what I said earlier about the job Eric Spoelstra did. That is not an easy situation to be in. You're standing up to the greatest players in the world in basketball. You've got a collection of them in one locker room. 3 of them have come from separate teams where they were the man on their team. Now you're blending them in together. You've got to get them to commit at the defensive end together. Can't leak out. Can't not block out. Can't not challenge a shooter. These are all things that maybe on their other teams they were able to get away with, but they couldn't do that now. If they wanted to win a championship, they had to make a commitment. Then at the offensive end of the floor, you've got to be willing to share the basketball, take fewer shots, score fewer points, and now at the end of the game, who gets the basketball? Who do I call the play for? Who, as the players like to say, whose team is it? Because all of that plays into the psyche of what you're dealing with nowadays with the players. Now, Spoelstra and his staff had to figure all that out and make it work. And when they were 9-8 in the beginning of the season, those were uneasy times. I was feeling for them, and I had nothing to do with them other than I'm an outsider watching, but being a former coach, I was feeling for their staff, feeling for him, being the young, terrific coach that he is, going through this and saying, gosh, when I see him lose, I go, this is a tough night for him. I can imagine he's going back and not getting much sleep tonight. But then they righted the ship. They went on the great run. They start playing great in the playoffs. And what was the conversation early on? The Heat are rolling now. They're going to roll through this thing in the end.
Yeah.
Now, what happens to LeBron down the stretch in the finals? Was LeBron having the same things go through his head as coaches do? Meaning, am I taking too many shots? Is Wade getting pissed off that I'm not getting him the ball enough? Should I be taking over the game now? I've got to leave the criticism from the media out of it because the media can't dictate how I play or how we play. All of that is going on in the young man's head. And he still is a young man. And it's still a young nucleus to that Miami team. So they get there to the finals. I think Greg Anthony say after the game the other night, I didn't think Miami was going to get this far because if you go back early in the year, the best team in basketball early in the year were the Boston Celtics.
Right.
To me, they were playing the best basketball early on. Then a number of things happened. There were injuries. There was major trade that took place. And they weren't the same Celtics down the stretch that they were early on. Then you had Chicago coming on like gangbusters, who winds up having the most wins in the NBA at the end of the year. You had San Antonio playing great basketball until that last stretch run where suddenly they weren't the same San Antonio team anymore. So, Miami, you may not have looked at them early on and said, you know what, they're going to be in the finals for sure. You may have said, there are like 3 or 4 other teams that could beat them. And I did happen to leave out the Lakers just now in that discussion because you always had to think the Lakers were going to be there. But the Lakers were not the same Laker team. Their chemistry was not the same. They weren't playing the same. Whatever there was going on in that locker room, you could have done a separate book on that one.
Right. So is it possible Miami just got hot for 2 rounds, but they weren't really a finals team? Because they shot the lights out against Boston and Chicago. Was it deceiving?
Yeah, they made shots. They defended like crazy. Their athleticism was too much, for the other guys to overcome. I think Chicago, if I'm looking at the Chicago series against them, I think what Chicago needed was one more ball handler to put it on the floor and break them down. Because eventually, when they went after Rose and took the ball out of his hands by double-teaming him hard, and Rose had to give the ball up, Well, you give it up to either a guy who's going to make a shot, a guy who's either in the post area that can score, or you give it up to a perimeter guy that if he can't make a shot or isn't making shots, if he puts it down and creates, maybe he creates something for the next guy on the team. And I'm not trying to judge the trade after the fact, but was Heinrich that guy that may have been that one other guy that could put it down a little bit? He can make three-point shots. He's got some defensive toughness to him. He's a veteran guy. You don't know. Looking back, would Heinrich have made a decision at that point against Miami? But that's how I saw that series, that Miami a little too athletic, and they were really good defensively during those first couple of rounds.
And we're making shots.
And making shots.
Can you win a title with two alpha dogs? Because it still hasn't happened. West and Baylor never won a title together. LeBron and Wade obviously didn't win this. You just go down the line, and it just feels like, and this is what part of my book was about, feels like there needs to be a pecking order where you need to know who your best guy is. Do you believe in that, or do you think they can overcome that?
Well, I guess Chicago would be a bad example because you wouldn't call Michael and anybody else after him, okay?
Right.
I mean, that there was a pecking order in Chicago. You'd probably have to go back to, let's go to the Pistons teams.
Isaiah, though.
Pecking order.
Isaiah was the alpha dog. He was the guy on that team. And then everybody else fell behind him. Wouldn't you say?
Even Joe Dumars would have to fall because Isaiah, and as you know, Isaiah, when he got carried away with being Isaiah and took 24 shots in a game, then they weren't a good Pistons team.
Right. And the Lakers...
Distribution. They won when they had distribution, when his assists were up and his field goal attempts were down. Now, did he have huge games where they needed him to do that? Yeah. The Hall of Fame players do that. They rise up on certain nights and give you a 40-point night, and you go, hey, they never would have won without him. Well, that's the reason they won. They had him. So, I'd agree. Now, can it happen? I would say, yeah, it can, but will we see it happen? Let's wait and see.
Well, let's say you had, on your team, you had Dominique Wilkins and the 88 Hawks. Let's say you had Dominique Wilkins, but instead of Kevin Willis, you had Charles Barkley. Does that team coexist?
If Charles would have let Dominique get back home on time before the next game, we may have had a chance. I would have had to sit down with Charles and say, all right, now we got to get Neek back home early enough for him to get his rest. But,
right. That's a good point.
Charles obviously was paired up with on a couple of his different teams, was paired up with other all-stars on the team. Could it get done? Yeah, you would have had a major rebounder and a low-post presence in Charles, a guy who was skilled enough to pass the basketball, could block shots even for his own size, and you would have had Dominique. And I think Charles was smart enough basketball-wise that he would have known that Neek has to get the ball X number of times during the game. But Charles also would have known that at times I've got to be the guy who puts the pressure on him on the inside. That's an interesting twosome to put together, whether they would have been enough or would have worked well enough together to win a championship.
86 Celtics, best team of all time?
It's tough to argue against them. When you look at everything, depth and everything they had going on there, that was quite an accumulation of players.
Because you went against the 86 Celtics and you went against the 96 Bulls, right?
Yes, both of them.
So who's better?
God, I hate when you get asked those questions.
Come on, answer it.
Like who's better, George Mikan or Will Chamberlain?
This is a fair question. They were 10 years apart. You coached against both of them. Who scared you more?
One guy on the Bulls scared me a whole lot. And the Celtics, they had a bunch of guys that scared me a whole lot.
Right.
It was the other guys on the Bulls teams played off of the one guy so well, whereas the Celtics team, you think about who you could throw the ball to get a basket for you. You couldn't throw the ball to a lot of people on Chicago's team and say to them, go get a basket for me. You could do that with the Celtics team.
Right. And also
post-wise, perimeter-wise. Meanwhile, with Chicago, they played so much off of A, Michael, and B, the athleticism of the three perimeter guys. And remember one time when it was Michael, Scotty, and Horace Grant, kind of different positions. So when you think about it, 2 guards, small forward, power forward, but very athletic guys. When they would go to those minutes during the course of the game where Grant would get up on the ball and Michael and Scotty would be pressing in the backcourt, and I remember Johnny Bach would call them his greyhounds. I mean, they caused panic and produced so many easy baskets because they were so athletic, that they'd get the easy scores by forced turnovers. That wasn't what that Celtic team was about, but the Celtic team would beat you by throwing it here, taking that guy on, throwing it there, taking that guy on, getting a big shot from this guy. More positions could beat you there.
So what are you going to do during the lockout?
Well, I am actually going to go over and coach the Ukrainian national team in the European Championships.
Beautiful.
First game is July 31st. Our group is the D group, and we have Russia, Slovenia, Belgium, Bulgaria, Georgia, and the Ukraine in that group. So you start out with 24 teams, 4 groups of 6. You play 5 games in 7 days, and at the end of the first 5 games, the top 3 teams in each group move on to the next round. The bottom 3 teams go home, you're done. The next 3 go on to the next round, the round of 12, and then you play all the way through. And the reason for that is the top 2 teams will qualify for the Olympics. Teams that finish 3, 4, 5, and 6, based on points that you accumulate from winning games, 3, 4, 5, and 6 don't get automatic spots in the Olympics, in the next year's Olympics, but what they get is a chance to come back next summer and be in that final qualification tournament. Just like South America's having a tournament, Asia's having a tournament, the teams that don't qualify and get a spot in the Olympics in London, they get a chance to come back next, whatever it is, June or whatever, play and try and win one of those spots right then and there, and then they would move right on into the Olympics. So that's what I'm doing if there is a lockout in the NBA.
So do you have a lottery pick on this team? Who's your best player?
Did you say, do I have a lottery pick?
Yeah, do you have somebody that, there's all these foreign guys in this year's draft. Do you have a guy, a go-to guy, somebody that I've heard of?
I think our go-to guy could be Fosenko from Utah.
Oh, I know Fosenko.
There you go.
You can post him up.
He will be one of our guys that will try to make our national team roster from the 18 or 19 guys that we're bringing into training camp.
Right.
This team is a team that has, it's in a developmental stage. What they want to do is they want to put a solid foundation in. They want to start the basketball program. They've got a new commitment now in the federation. Their president is Alexander Volkov, former NBA player. He's the president of the Basketball Federation. He has reunited the pro leagues in the Ukraine. They had went into 2 separate directions. He got them back together again, got them all playing as one pro league there. And because of his commitment and the outside resources that he's raised for the Basketball Federation, they now want to put something in that is a solid foundation that they can build on over the next 4, 5, 6 years to get them back in European basketball, mentioned along with teams like Spain, like Turkey, like Russia, like Lithuania, Croatia, the upper-level teams, Turkey, are playing at European basketball. And that's what his goal is. So they did not qualify the previous 2 European championships. They were not invited. They did not get invited initially for this year's, and then they expanded the field all of a sudden from 16 to 24 teams, and they were invited. So, it'll be an interesting time when we go over there. It'll be about a 10-week commitment going over to the Ukraine.
The Czar, Mike Fratello, good luck with that coaching thing, and hopefully I will see you on TNT within the next 6 to 8 months. Let's keep our fingers crossed. 4 to 6 months, 6 to 8 months, something. Thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it.
So I appreciate it, and I know that you've had my partner on TNT, Marv, on
yes.
a few times, and I want to thank you for giving him an opportunity, because not many people call and ask for Marv to be on, and I know he feels badly about that. So the fact that you gave him a couple of shots on the show is very important.
Oh, are you kidding? I'd love having him on. I'd have him on in a heartbeat.
That Marv he's the James Brown of broadcasters. He's the hardest working man.
Yeah.
This is a guy, think about it. He does 2 major sports to show you how hard he wants to work. Those 2 major sports, the NFL, which is on strike, and the NBA, which could be on strike, and Marv signs with both of them. Tells you how much he wants to work next season.
looks like he's going to have time to be on the BS Report. Thanks for coming on, Mike.
Okay, Bill, thank you.
So I get to sign off. Whoa!
Thank you for downloading the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at PodCenter at ESPNRadio.com.
Peace out.